Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our podcast today. My name is Clayton Wikaira. I work for Drowning Prevention Auckland, and we're going to be discussing around how people get into trouble diving and how people actually drown. Going to hopefully cover some topics around that, and hopefully it's going to be informative for each of us. We'll be speaking specifically around recreational diving, gathering shellfish, seafood, paua crayfish, and also a bit of spearfishing. Just to give us a bit of context for our kōrero tonight, most drownings happen, that do happen, 80% of them are male drownings in New Zealand. Māori make up 1/5 of that, so roughly 19% of drownings in the last 5 years have been Māori, so we're pretty overrepresented in the drowning statistics. A lot of that could be attributed to our connection with moana, and also our connection and our love for seafood and gathering kai moana. So the age groups also are roughly between 15 and 44 are the most vulnerable, and those that drown within that age bracket. So I have some guests with us today. Two guests, my elder brother Manu, who I've learned most of my diving from. I've been diving for over 30 years. And I also got a good friend, Joseph Rauri, and my whanaunga, who's also dived with me most of my life. And I've got them on because of the experiences that they have and the things that they're going to share with us. I think will be quite awesome. So if I could just get you to introduce yourselves, starting with Manu, and a little bit of background around how you got started diving, and just also maybe some of the gear that you started off with, and then Joseph.
Kia ora. Is born and bred in the Hokianga and dived mostly on the west coast from about the age of 12. Started out just going with my uncles, holding the bags while they were actually diving, and really didn't have any gear because we're just sort of learning. And so that was the start, and my introduction to actually gathering seafood was back then.
Oh, kia ora. Joseph Rauri is the name, born and bred in Whirinaki up in the Hokianga. Yeah, done most of my diving on the west coast, just like Clayton and Manu. Firstly started off going up with Dad and going to dive for the marais and that, and yeah, starting off about 5 years of age, just in the rock pools and that. When Dad would get out, he'd spend half an hour with us, just showing us how to pick paua and how to do it safely. Didn't have much gear. I think it was basically just shorts and a t-shirt and a knife. Yeah, so yeah, started out like that.
Cool. So how about you, Manu? What was some of your diving gear when you first started, and how did you slowly progress with type of gear?
Yeah, well, I was taught from one of my uncles that you didn't really need a wetsuit. You only needed something to keep your head warm. So I always made sure I had a hat for my head to keep me warm, and that would initially help me. Other than that, never had a lot of diving gear. But I used to started diving with my uncle Ben Moranga, and we used to go and dive for Aiga. And as Aiga divers, he would kit us up. All his children had the correct gear, and I was just lucky to fit some of their gear. So he'll give me the jacket, wetsuit, weight belt, flippers, snorkel, glasses. And so that was an introduction to using good gear. And that's how I started out.
Cool. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, like when I kind of got to the age of, 10, 11, 12, Dad could see that I'd taken on his teachings, and he started trusting me out in the water a bit more. When I do work around the house and all that, he'd help pay for, my first suit. I remember getting it from the warehouse in Auckland. It was like a real big deal. So, but yeah, the old man, when he did things, he made sure he did them properly, and he actually bought me the whole kit. So I had to do a bit more work around the house and help him with panel beating and that down in the shed, just to pay for the other gears, the flippers, booties, good mask and snorkel and gloves and that, yeah. So started around 12 collecting all the good gear. But like I said before, I don't know if it was his plan to not have us any good gears when we were young, just so we'd, only be able to spend half an hour in the water with them, and then that'll be it. And you'll be like, yep, next time you might spend an hour, or you might get to come out with me. So, yeah.
I think it's important to make a note too, back in the, the mid-70s and mid-80s, there was a lot more kaimoana, so you didn't have to go it as further. So a lot of times, you were actually standing on the power, whereas now, because of quite a bit of recreational and commercial and whatnot, a lot more fishing out there, you actually got to go out a little bit further. So, that's great around the gear. So I'm just going to start introduce our topic. So our topic pretty much is, why do people actually get into difficulty when they're diving? And, what are the key learnings that we can learn from? And I know both of you have got great experience, and I've had a few experiences around the, being pretty close to the thought of drowning. And so I know there's a few factors. One is maybe not having the right gear, or having the right gear but not being prepared for the conditions, having everything like that. And it could be a whole lot of other things: underestimating the risk, overestimating one's ability, thinking that you've done this before, and all that kind of thing. Also, as we get older, we don't retain our fitness, but in our minds we still think we're fit, and then just getting out there. So if you can maybe share a little bit of experiences that you had around gathering kai, and what made you change. So maybe we could start with Manu, if you have got an experience, and then Joe.
Yeah, I remember, I suppose there was one time I was diving. I was in pretty good water, and but the tide was starting to come in, and I thought, yeah, well, that's good, because the waves would always push you in. And then secondly, I was only diving with one flipper. I don't know what happened to the other one, but I thought, oh yeah, that's all good. But one of the cousins came and gave me his bag, and then it was too much weight for me to kick in. The tides turned, and so the swells were getting bigger and getting more back drag on the back of the waves once they blew past you. And about 2 or 3 of those, and you're sort of right at the back, you're struggling to swim, you're swallowing water. Then you had to make the decision: do I hold on the bag and drown, or do I let the bag go? So fortunately for me, I did let the bag go on that day. I had no regrets that I didn't take all that, some power home or stuff like that. But I had to recalculate what I was doing. So one was get my rest, get a good breath, and try and work with the next waves coming in, because they were blowing right through me. And that's just one experience.
Cool. Okay, Joe, how about you?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is probably 4 years ago. We went up to Pānihi on the west coast there, just past Yellow Rock and Jacko's in there, for a dive for one of the hui at Mātai. And there was me, your other brother, your guy's younger brother Daniel, one of his mates, one of your guys' mates, Chex, and a couple of other boys. It was a pretty crappy day. We went to Panehe. That looked like the best spot at the time. We checked out Jackos and all that, and there was a few mean swells rolling through. So and the tide was coming in, so we're thinking, oh yeah, no, we'll be safe, we'll be able to swim in, no sweat, sort of to what Manu said. But yeah, we're out there, and I had just brought a flash, brand new crayfish sack, a blue one. I thought it would be mean, and I'd never tried it before. So I'm out there. It was all good at the start, filling up the bag with the powers and all that. And then when it was time to come in, it was a lot harder than than usual. And I was thinking, oh, must be this. It actually felt like the current was a lot stronger. And I was thinking, man, it shouldn't be like that. Tide's coming in, But yeah, I was just actually in the zone where it was actually sweeping back around the outsides of the lagoon. But what made it real hard was this. I figured out it was the bag as well. It was actually not letting any water through, and it was like creating heaps of drag. And I was like, oh no, had to try and fix it out way out the back of Panehe there, and the swells were quite big too. So yeah. It was just experiencing new gear that I hadn't used before because I'd been staying in Auckland and that. So, yeah, that's the one that comes to mind.
Started making you get a bit tired with the drag, eh?
Yeah, it just had no holes in it, bro, to let any water through. Yeah, and it was creating heaps of drag, quite big too.
I remember one of my experiences was with Conrad Leaf, and basically I was still, building up my competency of diving, and we weren't diving with buoyancy back then, buoyancy aids. So, I had no buoys or anything to hold my catch. He was holding a catch bag sack. I had a shirt full of power, and he goes, "Oh, should we go and get some crays out the back?" And I went, "Oh yeah, cool, that'll be awesome." How far? And he pointed out, and I go, "It looked pretty far." But I thought, because I could see the reefs were showing, I thought I could have a rest on the reef. So we started kicking over. Just as we get to the reef, he goes, "Oh, here, can you hold on to my sack?" So he had like about a quarter bag sack full of power, and I had my shirt full of power. And I thought, oh, I'll just jump onto the reef and have a rest. And then I looked up, and all these sets of waves came and blew me off the reef. And then I was in white water. I was underneath the water trying to get my breath and kicking, and because it's aerated, you're just sinking to the bottom. So I just yelled out, I don't know where, I just chucked the sack somewhere where the reef was, and I just said, "I'm going back." And then I started swimming back in, trying to get my breath, and I sat on a rock. I was able to drift back in onto a rock, and I sat there for a good, half hour. He was calling me over. I was headed, but that was a good learning experience for myself. So I think with some of these experiences that we have, it's important to take away what was the takeaway message and what was the experience. So for you, Manu, what was that experience that you had? And I know for us as Māori, a lot of times we can get quite prideful. But you can maybe share a little bit about that. What was the learning experience from that, you dropping the bag?
Yeah, well, one lesson to learn from that was having the correct gear. I didn't even have a buoy at that time. All I had was holding the bag, one hand on the bag, one hand on the knife, and one flipper. So it didn't help anything. But also what I actually learned, what was a big learning for me, was that when the waves build up and they blow past you, they can suck you back 20 or 30 meters on one go. And if get hit with back-to-back sets, like maybe a set of 3, you could end up 50 to 70 meters to 100 meters back out in the open. And definitely for that short experience, fatigue kicked in because I was getting tired, plus holding the bag and then taking in water. So I had to just relax and let the bag go. And so that was a huge learning for me. I always thought that on a turning tide coming in, all good because the tide will push you in. But if you get into some of those channels where the waves can just blow right past you, like you're not even there, and then the backwash coming off that, the backdraft coming off that, sucking you back out, was actually quite a huge learning.
Mm. How about you, Joe, on your one?
Yeah, just yeah, like I had good buoyancy in that. My learning of that experience is that bag I purchased is more so for bottle diving and for for craze, not the type of bag you'd want to attach to a 20-litre buoyancy device. Yeah, and because I was a little bit rushed that day, I didn't tie it up nice and high, so it was high up in the water. It was kind of done real fast, and there was a bit of gap between the actual buoyancy device and the sack, which was allowing the powers in that to hit on the rocks as I was trying to swim in. So I was lucky I had my buoyancy device where I could go there and rest on it for a while I'm shortening it all up and getting it all nice and tight, because I knew if I didn't, that it was going to be, touch and go, because it got pretty crap that day. And I was actually just lucky that I had a number of experiences like that, sad to say, but yeah, just having the confidence that we're Māoris and we do this stuff all the time, and it'll be sweet.
Yeah, the attitude, that sometimes
Yeah.
have. And, I know the thing around culture, bringing a kai home, doing whatever it takes, supporting hui and tangi, sometimes can put a bit of pressure on us to, the mana of the marae to, put the best kai out on the table, but sometimes you don't get the good conditions. And we've had a few experiences around that when it's pumping and it's rough, you're struggling to get a feed, and it's quite very risky. So, excuse me, quite risky. So there's a couple other things I just wanted to cover here. The difference between competency and experience. Is there a difference? If so, what are they? And I suppose I could give one example, the example where I was competent, I was diving for quite a while. It was an incoming tide, so that same thing, I thought, oh, well, it's incoming. And then I could just start feeling the pull, and it was dragging me out. Now, I had been diving for quite a while, so in my mind, I was competent. But in terms of the experience where I started becoming exhausted and I was kicking and not making any gains, I couldn't even catch the swelling. They were moving so fast past me, and it was dragging me out. And actually me and Joe in that same experience, we were there together, and we were trying to get back in to the rocks, and we just got one little wave that just sort of pushed us a little bit. It was enough for us to get momentum to get us to the rocks, and we were like, had it. So my learning from that was the experience that I thought was going to cost me my life, that added on top of the competency later on after that, because I was very wary of the type of conditions I was going to dive in from that one experience. Now, people that cannot have those experiences all their lives can be competent, but when their time happens, that's usually the time when they get into trouble. So what are some of your guys' feelings around that?
Competency, I think we all start off as being competent divers as we continue to dive throughout our lives. But I think that when we have experience, the experiences that we've had, we've got to take the learning from that experience so that we're better for the next time. We say you might not want to be in that predicament ever again, but you've learned from that last experience. So experiences, we're all experienced divers, especially for the West Coast. And we sort of can, even just before we even get off the vehicle onto the beach, have one glance around to say, yep, that's in our favor or it's not in our favor. But I think that comes from having that experience too, to be able to read the conditions. And, you know, I know for, I suppose, a golden rule, when you have like 3 days easterlies, it's normally pretty good up at the coast there. And the water's pretty much settled clean. But anything before that, you're still sort of looking hard and murky conditions. And just the West Coast itself, you know, the wind can change just like that. And your whole diving experience can change with just with the change of the wind or what the different currents are doing at that time. Yeah, so that's for me. Competent. I think we're all competent divers, but we learn from our experiences, which gives us even more, I suppose, awareness of the risks that are involved where we dive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've always thought I've been a competent swimmer, diver. I've swum the harbour, Hokianga Harbour, from the sand dunes back over to Opunoni twice. Been diving, you know, since 12. I've had a lot of information given to me from my dad, uncles and cousins, you know, and I'm lucky that I had all that information, because about like the time, the situation Clayton was talking about before, we were pretty much side by side for a long time, kicking and kicking to try and get in. I always knew in the back of my head that I could drop the sack or the weight belt, you know, but we're just looking over at each other and we're like, yep, still all good, bro. Yep, keep kicking, it'll happen. We'll get in. And then even getting to that stage, we're thinking, hey, I don't want to have to drop the sack. Or the weight belt, you know, cost a lot of money for this weight belt. Then I'll get in trouble from Dad for being in that situation. He would have said, you know, hey, I've given you all the knowledge in that. Was the tides right? Was the easterly winds, you know, on long enough? Was it flat? Would have got drilled from him. But yeah, so after that experience, I knew that my competency had gone up a little bit more, because you know, got through that one luckily without having to drop any gear in that. But it was just good having the buddy next to me, the bro Clayton. Yeah, just confident that we were still, you know, in it, no sweat. Yeah, so that was mine.
Really good points too around gear. You know, what's $100 weight belt for someone's life, eh? You know, I'd buy my brother and my mates a 3 or 4 weight belts if it was to save their life. And sometimes, you know, we have that thing around not ditching our gear and leaving our gear, you know, but we need to play things safe, and life should always come first so we can return back to our whānau. We can keep enjoying diving experiences instead of taking those risks. And I think for us as Māori, sometimes our culture being warriors and, you know, the thought of our ancestors coming through the Pacific on canoes, you know, that it's in our blood, in our veins. We look at other things in the water as kaitiaki and tonga, you know, but there's got to be a point when we still have to consider to be safe, when we're diving. And for me, the biggest learning that I got was people drown because of being exhausted and being tired and not being able to keep themselves above the water. So we know now your last resort, if you're going to sink, drop that weight belt. So at least you're going to be at the top. Doesn't mean you're always going to survive, but at least you're going to be at the top of the water, and people will be able to find you, see you, and rescue you. I had one experience of a rescue where one of my mates got sucked out with his tanks, and it was the most ruggedest tide you could have been in. It was just waves were pumping, and he was right amongst the waves. So I swam out with my 2 buoys, got out there, I turned around, I couldn't find where he was. And then I saw him, and he had caught a wave all the way in with his tanks and his BCD. right on where the rocks were. And I thought, wow, I was so happy. And then I turned around and, oh, gee, now I got to get back in. But my two buoys, I was out to like surf and catch waves all the way in. And it was sort of a testament to me that I knew my gear was my safety line. So I think having buoyancy that holds your catch, your weight, is one of the most important things to be promoting out there. And yeah, you learn from those experiences of being tired. But I could swim 200 to 300 meters offshore, but my two buoys, it can carry quite a few people on their weight. And if I needed to rescue someone that had no energy at all, then I would have that ability where they could just rest, the buoys go underneath. It keeps their airways above the water, and you can kind of like drag them in or just even leave them there until help gets there. At least they got something to hang on to. So just, I suppose, closing off, what are some of your closing remarks you'd like to share, if there's any other thoughts or experiences as we close? And then I just want to cover off a few key points maybe for our listeners and those that are listening to this podcast, how you can be more safer out there when you're diving.
So what I suppose I've learned over the years is definitely investing in good gear. Definitely doing some preparation around what the tides are doing, what the winds are doing. And those were some of the main points that I've learned over all these years, really, is around prep, good gear, good buoyancy, because the conditions can change really easily. But, you know, as you get older, you seem to pick your tides. When you were young, it was just any tide. And so some of those experiences, some of those pressures about diving for marae or diving for tangihanga or weddings or birthdays, for me, it really came down to most times now is what are the conditions? Do the conditions going to pan out for me to have a successful dive or not? And I've got to that stage now where if it isn't going to be a successful dive, or the conditions won't allow you to enjoy your dive, or it's a bit like 50-50, I'd rather save the dive for another day and go when it's that beautiful tide.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of my prep work has come down to actually respecting Tangaroa and making sure that my head is clear when I go, that I'm not hungover from drinking or being up too late at night, making sure I've done the prep work. These days you've got swell map and marine weather and all that, and they're pretty accurate, but and making sure I've got all the right gear, you know, good warm suit for like if it's winter, making sure you got your nice 5mm at least that fits good in that. So if you do have to spend a bit of time in the moana waiting for the chopper to come find you, or Coast Guard, that's how to survive. And it's also letting your close ones know where you are going to be diving, roughly when you should return home. And yeah, my biggest one now is making sure that you've got good buoyancy, because yeah, if you can just rest on that, you know, recover if you're exhausted, save other people while you're out there. Yeah, so it's, for me, a lot of it's just come down to respecting Tangaroa and knowing that we have got like a spiritual connection with Tangaroa.
Awesome. Well, thank you to both for your experiences and your kōrero. And I'm sure it's been informative for our listeners and those that have been listening. We haven't sort of covered shallow water blackout. I'll just make a little comment on that basically when people are diving at depths or holding their breath for like over a minute, 2 minutes and above, it's something when someone's resurfacing back to the top, they can slowly get a tingling under their tongue, a feeling of like a buzz, like they've got heaps of air, heaps of lungs to get to the top, but they just don't make it. They just slowly black out and just end up slowly starting to sink. That's another danger. But I think for more shallower and recreational diving, it can happen with that too. But the depths are usually, 3 to 4 to 5 meters, maybe max for some divers that are just diving for like power and other things. So just being aware of that. So just our key messages that we have is, making sure you have buoyancy, buoys, or something that can hold your catch. You don't want it too hard, like those ones that have got a net around a hard glass. Those buoys will knock you out. My mate found that out. And having all the right gear and the different types of flippers for the different conditions. If you've got really long flippers, they're going to wear you out. It's like a high gear on the bike and you're like using a lot of energy. If you're in current, having long flippers can wear you out. Ones with split fins or smaller fins can be a lot better. Always going out with someone who's experienced and someone who's, a competent diver, but more so experienced and they know what they're looking for. Checking the weather and always diving with a buddy, making sure that you look after each other out there. So thank you both for your sharing tonight in our podcast. Appreciate your time. And our next podcast will most probably look at covering shallow water blackout, tank diving, dangers around tank diving, and investigate other areas and other experiences where people have gotten into trouble and learnings that people can take away. So I'd just like to finish off that we have an e-learning platform on our webpage, Drowning Prevention Auckland webpage. It's www.watersafe.org.nz. And there's a diving safety video on there that's got quizzes and answers that someone can participate on. Just in closing, Nāku te rauro, no te rauro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your basket and my basket, the people will flourish. So I'd just like to end our podcast there. Thank you, brothers, for your kōrero today. Awesome.
Kia ora, bro.
Kia ora.
Catch yous up. Thank you very much.